My own mother called me a broke loser and told me to sleep at a shelter. She had no idea who was pulling up to her front door. The moment my own mother pointed at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered onto her porch, I didn't say a word. I just stood there. Dusty sneakers on cobblestone, a faded gray hoodie that smelled like a Greyhound bus, a backpack with a broken zipper I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years, and behind her, my sister, arms crossed, wearing a blazer that cost more than my first month's rent in Houston, smirking like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. I'd rehearsed this scene 10,000 times on the drive over. I thought I was ready. I was not ready. Because nothing, not therapy, not distance, not 23 years of building something from nothing, prepares you for the specific way your mother looks at you when she's decided you're not worth a glass of water. That look. I'll carry it until I die. But what happened 10 minutes later? That part I'll carry differently. Let me back up, because if I start in the middle, you'll think I'm the villain. People usually do at first when they hear my story. He left his family. He abandoned everyone. He only thought about himself. I've heard all of it. I've heard it from people who ate because of me, which is the kind of irony that keeps you awake at 3 a.m., staring at hotel ceilings in cities that never fully sleep. My name is Marcus Miller. I grew up in San Marcos, Texas, a small, quiet town about 30 miles south of Austin, where everybody knows everybody, and everybody's business is everybody else's business, which sounds charming until you're the kid whose father walked out when you were 9 and left your mother with 2 children, a mortgage she couldn't afford, and a bitterness she never figured out how to put down. My mother, Susan Miller, was not a cruel woman by nature. I want to be fair about that, even now. She was a frightened woman who channeled her fear into control, and when control slipped, which it always does, she channeled the fear into anger instead. My sister Kayla learned early that the safest place in the house was beside Mom, agreeing with everything she said, laughing at the same people she laughed at. I was never built that way. I was the kid who asked too many questions, who wanted to understand things, who sat at the kitchen table doing math problems by flashlight after the electricity got cut off again and thought, there has to be a way out of this. I found it at 17. A recruiter came through our high school looking for people to join a commercial cleaning company that operated across 3 states. The pay was decent, the hours were brutal, and they'd help you get your documentation in order if your situation was complicated. Mine was not complicated. I was born here, technically an American, but my financial situation was, and they didn't ask about that. I told my mother I was leaving to make money, real money, that I'd send back everything I could, that I'd take care of the house, take care of Kayla, take care of the bills I'd watched pile up on the counter since I was old enough to read. She didn't hug me when I left. She told me I was selfish. I was 17 years old and I told her, okay, Mom, I'll show you. The first years were brutal, in a way I don't have the right words for. I was cleaning office buildings in Houston at 2 a.m., then driving 2 hours to clean a medical facility in Pasadena, then sleeping in my car for 4 hours before starting again. I ate gas station food and kept a spreadsheet on a flip phone. Actual paper spreadsheet, I mean, because the phone couldn't run apps. Tracking every dollar. What I made, what I kept, what I sent home. The first wire transfer I sent was $800. I remember the exact amount because I cried sending it, not from sentiment, from exhaustion. That $800 represented 6 18-hour days. It represented a bruised back and chemical burns on my hands from industrial bleach. It represented sleeping in a parking lot in July with the windows cracked. My mother called 2 days later, not to thank me, to ask when the next one was coming. That was the template for the next 2 decades. I won't bore you with every step of the climb, because this story isn't really about success. It's about what success reveals. But here are the broad strokes. By 23, I had enough saved to register my first legitimate LLC, a residential and commercial cleaning company, because I knew the business from the inside, knew what worked, knew what didn't, knew exactly where owners were losing money and where they were wasting time. I hired 6 people, then 12, then 40. By 30, Miller Property Services operated in 4 states and had contracts with 3 hospital networks, 2 national retail chains, and a portfolio of luxury residential buildings in Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. I bought equipment instead of leasing it. I hired an accountant, a real one, Deborah Chen, CPA, 17 years in commercial tax law, and she helped me structure everything properly, build reserves, pay taxes on time, stay clean. Every single month, without fail, I wired money home to 118 Oak Ridge Avenue. Mortgage payments, property taxes, renovation costs when the roof needed replacing in 2009, new appliances in 2014, a full kitchen remodel in 2018 that I approved via email without ever seeing the finished result. I saw photos though. Kayla sent them sometimes, not as a thank you, as a kind of flex, I think. Look at what we have now. Look at this beautiful life. And in the background of those photos, I'd see my mother wearing jewelry I'd never seen before, holding a glass of something amber, looking comfortable in a way I couldn't quite name. I sent a lot of money home. I never once received a birthday call. The idea started the way most important decisions in my life have started. Quietly, at 4 a.m., sitting alone with a cup of coffee I'd let go cold. I was 40 years old. I had $14 million in combined assets across my business business holdings, a charitable foundation I'd built called the Miller Foundation, focused on housing and workforce programs for single mothers, and I hadn't been back to San Marcos in 23 years. I had no wife, no kids, a few good friendships, the deep kind that survived distance and years, but nothing that looked like what most people would call a family. And I realized I didn't actually know if I had a family. I knew I had people who received my money. That's not the same thing. The question kept circling back. If I showed up with nothing, would they still open the door? My attorney, Thomas Gray, JD, 15 years in civil and estate law, a man I trusted with my life and several large buildings, told me the idea was legally interesting but emotionally inadvisable. His exact words. Thomas has a gift for understatement. My therapist, Dr. Renata Voss, who I'd been seeing every 2 weeks for 6 years in Austin, was more direct. Marcus, she said, you're not looking for closure. You're looking for proof, and you need to be prepared for what happens when the proof isn't what you hoped for. I told her I was prepared. She wrote something in her notebook and didn't push back. I think she knew. The plan took 4 months to put together properly. Thomas handled the legal side, pulling every deed, every mortgage record, every wire transfer receipt from 23 years of payments. All of it documented, all of it organized into a binder that, when stacked, was about 3 inches thick and represented the cleaner portion of my entire adult life. The property at 118 Oak Ridge Avenue had been purchased through a trust registered in my name in 2001. Every payment since, taxes, utilities, renovations, the whole picture, had flowed automatically from a business account attached to Miller Holdings. My mother and sister had been living in my house for 23 years. They just didn't know I knew that. Or more precisely, they knew whose money paid for it. They just never thought about what that meant legally. People rarely do when the checks keep coming. My assistant, a sharp 29-year-old named Delia Reyes, who had worked for me for 4 years and handled every logistical crisis I'd ever thrown at her without blinking, coordinated the ground team, 3 black SUVs, 2 members of Thomas's firm, Delia with the briefcase, security standing by but instructed to stay calm and say nothing unless I gave a signal, and me, in a faded hoodie, dusty sneakers, a backpack, the most convincing outfit I'd worn in a decade, which is saying something, because I genuinely hate shopping. I drove myself. Old Honda Accord I kept for exactly this kind of anonymity. I didn't want anyone in town recognizing the man before the door opened. I arrived at 118 Oak Ridge Avenue at 12:14 p.m. on a Thursday in September. The house was beautiful. I stood on the sidewalk for almost 2 minutes just looking at it. Fresh paint, a deep cream color I didn't choose, but it worked. New iron gate, polished. Flower boxes under the front windows that were genuinely lovely. The old oak tree in the front yard was enormous now, the one I used to climb as a kid, back when the house was peeling and the yard was dead, and my mother was sitting at the kitchen table pretending she wasn't crying. I'd paid for all of it, every inch. I raised my hand and knocked. The door opened, and I saw her, my mother, 67 years old. Gold earrings, gold bracelet, a blouse I would have guessed cost $200, a glass of whiskey in her hand at noon, which landed in my stomach like a stone because some things never change. She looked healthy, more than healthy. She looked comfortable in a way that takes years to build. Years and someone else's money. She looked at me, not recognition first. There was a half second of pure blankness, the way you look at a stranger on your porch. Then something shifted in her eyes as she found the shape of the face she knew, and it wasn't warmth that came next. It was disdain, just like that. Not Marcus, is that you? Not even what happened to you. Just the way your face changes when someone shows up at your door looking like a problem. Mom, I said. My voice held, barely. I came back. I lost everything. I don't have anywhere else to go. A silence that felt geological. She took a sip of her whiskey. We don't take in failures here, she said, flat, like reading from a card. Whatever mess you made out there, it's yours to clean up. Kayla appeared behind her, my little sister, the one I'd been sending money to since she was 12 years old. She was dressed in something expensive, blazer, slacks, the kind of shoes that announce themselves before you do. She looked at me the way you look at something mildly disgusting on the bottom of your shoe. You left, she said. You left everyone and now you show up here looking like this? You don't get to do that. Every word landed exactly where she aimed it. I just need a few days, I said, keeping my voice soft, careful. I'll sleep on the porch. I won't bother anyone. Just a few days and then I'll figure something out. My mother laughed. It wasn't a complicated laugh. It wasn't even cruel in a dramatic way. It was just dismissive. The sound you make when someone suggests something too absurd to take seriously. There's a church shelter 3 blocks down, she said. That's where people in your situation go. Don't come here again looking like this. The door started to swing shut, and I stood there, hands loose at my sides, the sun pressing down on my shoulders. The smell of that house, the house I bought, the house I paid for, the house I dreamed about from parking lots in Houston, drifting out through the narrowing gap. If you had offered me even a glass of water when I arrived, things might have ended differently. I thought it. I didn't say it yet. The door didn't close all the way, because that's when the engine started. 3 black SUVs turning the corner of Oak Ridge Avenue at 12:27 p.m. is not a subtle thing. I heard the neighbors before I saw them, a curtain pulling back across the street, a man stopping on his walk to stare, a kid on a bicycle slowing to a halt. The vehicle stopped in a precise line in front of the house, and the doors opened with that smooth, coordinated efficiency that only happens when people have rehearsed. Thomas Gray stepped out first. Gray suit, blue tie, the kind of posture that comes from 30 years of courtrooms. He's not a tall man, but he carries himself like the room is always exactly the right size for him. Behind him, two members of his firm, Adriana Park, JD, and a newer associate whose name I always forget, and then Delia with the leather briefcase and the expression of someone who had organized 14 things before breakfast and wasn't remotely impressed by any of this. Two security contractors stayed near the vehicles, present, visible, hands at their sides. Kayla's smirk evaporated. "Mom," she said, low and fast. "What is this?" My mother stepped onto the porch, whiskey still in hand, and did what she always did when she was scared. She went on offense. "If he owes you money, you came to the wrong place," she called out, pointing at me. "We're not responsible for anything this man has done." Thomas walked up the path at exactly the pace of a man who has delivered difficult news many times and learned that speed is rarely your friend. He stopped at the porch steps and produced a business card. "Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Gray. I'm legal counsel representing Miller Holdings and the Miller Foundation." He paused to let that settle. "I'm looking for Marcus Miller." "Miller what?" My mother actually squinted at the card, like the words might rearrange themselves into something more manageable. Delia opened the briefcase. "We're here regarding the property at 118 Oak Ridge Avenue," Thomas continued, "specifically to conduct a formal legal review of occupancy status and facilitate transfer of deed to the Miller Foundation housing program." Kayla's face went through 6 expressions in about 2 seconds. I watched them cycle: confusion, irritation, bravado, real fear, attempted recovery, and then a kind of pale blankness that I recognized as the look of someone whose story is coming apart. "This is our home," she said, firm, but the edges were already soft. "We live here. We've always lived here." Thomas looked at me, actually looked at me, not at them, and said, "Would you like me to proceed, Mr. Miller?" My mother turned, the way someone turns when they hear a sound they can't place. She looked at me standing there in my hoodie and my dusty sneakers, and I watched the math happen in real time behind her eyes. The SUVs, the lawyers, the name, the question directed at the man she'd just turned away from her door. "Marcus," she said, different tone now, completely different. "What is happening?" I reached up and unzipped the hoodie. Underneath, a white silk dress shirt, collar open, a watch that didn't call attention to itself but would if you knew watches. I slipped the backpack off and set it on the porch railing. Delia was already at my side, handing me a folder I'd reviewed 100 times. "We're talking about what I've been paying for," I said, "for 23 years. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've heard in my life. Adriana Park stepped forward and adjusted her glasses. "According to property records filed with the Hayes County Clerk's office," she said, her voice carrying the pleasant neutrality of someone reading from a legal document, "this property was purchased in October of 2001 through the Miller Family Trust, with Marcus Allen Miller listed as sole beneficiary and controlling party. All mortgage payments, property taxes, utility arrangements, and renovation permits filed between 2001 and the present year were funded through accounts registered to Miller Holdings, LLC." She turned a page. "The most recent property tax payment was made 6 weeks ago, automatically, from the same account it's been drawn from for 22 consecutive years." Kayla sat down on the porch steps. She didn't choose to sit. Her legs just stopped working properly, and she went down. I recognized that the specific way your body makes decisions for you when your mind refuses to process something. "We pay taxes," she said. "It came out small. We maintain everything. You've been authorized occupants," Adriana said, not unkindly. "The financial maintenance of this property has been managed remotely by Mr. Miller throughout the duration of your residence." My mother's whiskey glass slipped. She caught it, barely. "Marcus." Her voice had changed completely. Gone was the flat dismissal, the boredom, the casual cruelty of a woman who had decided she was too comfortable to be bothered. In its place, fear, pure, undisguised. "I don't understand. You said you lost everything. You showed up looking like someone who needed help," I said quietly. "Like someone who needed a place to sleep for a few nights? Like someone who just wanted to know if his family would offer him a glass of water?" The oak tree rustled. A neighbor's lawnmower started up the block. Nobody on this porch moved. "It was a test," Thomas said. "Not dramatically, just factually, the way you'd state the weather. Mr. Miller wanted to understand whether the relationships he'd financially supported for over 2 decades were genuine or contingent on his financial contributions." "That's insane," Kayla whispered. Not angry, just emptied out. "Marcus, that's insane, is it?" I looked at her. My little sister. The girl I used to help with homework. The girl whose first car I'd bought. A 2007 Toyota Camry, $8,400 out of pocket, when she turned 17, because I remembered how it felt to not have options. "I called you 3 years ago when I was in the hospital. Appendix. Emergency surgery. I was alone in a recovery room in Dallas at midnight. I paused. You texted me back 4 days later to ask if I'd seen the wire request you'd sent." Her mouth opened, closed. "I called Mom when Dad's old business partner reached out. Man I hadn't heard from since I was a kid. Wanted to do something nice. Offer the family some kind of memorial thing. I wanted to tell her together. She asked me while I was talking if I could increase the monthly transfer because Kayla wanted to redo the bathrooms. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth. Not a birthday, I said. My voice was still steady. I'd had 6 years of therapy and 4 months of preparation for this moment, and I was not going to waste it by losing the thread. Not a Christmas call. Not a, "How are you, Marcus? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you lonely out there by yourself?" Nothing. Just the transfers. And when the transfers came, everything was fine. And when I called with something that had nothing to do with money, there was always somewhere else to be. Thomas stepped forward and opened another document. "The Miller Foundation," he said, "currently holds assets of approximately $12 million, directed toward workforce development programs and transitional housing for low-income single mothers and their children." He looked up. "Mr. Miller established it 8 years ago. It has housed over 200 families." My mother's glass hit the porch floor this time. She didn't try to catch it. The sound of breaking glass on a quiet Thursday afternoon in San Marcos, Texas. Somehow it was the most honest thing that had happened since I drove up. What followed was the part I'd rehearsed least. My mother grabbed my hands. Her grip was strong. It always had been. And the familiarity of it hit me somewhere I wasn't prepared for. She smelled like the same perfume from my childhood. That detail almost broke me. "Please," she said. "Marcus, I didn't understand. I didn't know the situation. Please come inside. This is your home. It always was. It always was," I said. "You just didn't act like it. We're still your family." Her voice was cracking. Whatever I said at the door, I panicked. "I didn't recognize you at first. I was confused." "You recognized me, Mom." I said it gently, but I didn't let it be a question. She had. I'd seen it in her face. That half second of recognition followed by a decision. The decision was the thing I couldn't unhear. Kayla was crying now. Not performance crying, but the messy, ugly kind that happens when something true forces its way through. "Please don't do this," she said. "You can't take our home. This is where we live. This is where everything is." "Everything," I said, and I let that word sit for a moment. "Right." I turned to Thomas. He was already looking at me. We'd been through this part too, sitting across from each other in his conference room while the air conditioning hummed, and he'd ask me, "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?" And I'd told him I was, and he'd said, "Okay then, let's talk about what this looks like." "Proceed with the original plan," I said. Thomas nodded, opened the final folder. "Per the directive executed by Mr. Miller and registered with the Miller Foundation Board of Directors," he said, his voice carrying the particular weight of words that are already done, already signed, already real. "The property at 118 Oak Ridge Avenue will be transferred to the Miller Foundation Housing Program. The house will be converted into transitional housing for low-income single mothers and their children, managed by the foundation, effective 90 days from today." The world stopped for a moment. Then Kayla screamed. Not a dramatic scream, the real kind, the kind that comes from a place beneath words, the sound a person makes when something they assumed was permanent simply ceases to exist. She sat on those porch steps and screamed, and then she covered her face, and the screaming became crying, and I stood there and felt, not satisfaction exactly, something more complicated, something closer to grief wearing the costume of resolution. "Where are we supposed to go?" my mother asked. She'd aged about 10 years in 10 minutes. She looked at me the way she probably should have been looking at me for decades. Actually looking, actually seeing. "Marcus, where are we supposed to go?" "You have 90 days, I said. "I've instructed the foundation to provide a list of transitional assistance resources for the county. You won't be left without options." "Resources," she repeated, like the word was in a language she was only beginning to learn. "That's more than you offered me today," I said. "I asked for 3 days on the porch. You gave me the address of a shelter." She didn't have anything to say to that. Neither did Kayla. Delia had the door of the first SUV open before I took a step toward it. I walked slowly, not dramatically, not performing, just tired in that deep way that only lifts when something you've been carrying for a very long time is finally set down. I stopped at the vehicle, turned back one last time. My mother was standing on the porch of the house I bought, holding nothing now, her whiskey pooled in broken glass at her feet, looking at me from inside a life I had built around her, without her ever once asking if I was okay inside it. "If you had offered me a glass of water when I arrived," I said, "I want you to know, I genuinely don't know what I would have done. I had a different plan written too. One where we sat at the kitchen table and talked for the first time in 23 years. I let that land, but you didn't." I got in the SUV. The door closed with a sound that was heavier than any door has a right to be. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in December, I sat in a folding chair in the front room of 118 Oak Ridge Avenue, which was, by then, freshly painted inside, furnished plainly and well, smelling like fresh coffee and cleaning products, and watched the first family move in. A woman named Darnell Hughes, 29 years old, with 2 daughters, ages 6 and 4. She'd been sleeping in her car for 6 weeks. She'd been referred by a social worker named Brianna Okafor from the Hayes County Services Office, who'd been working with the foundation for 2 years, and who, when she walked Darnell and her daughters through the front door for the first time, looked at me across the room and gave me a nod that meant something I don't have a word for. The 6-year-old ran straight for the oak tree in the front yard. She grabbed grabbed the lowest branch and started pulling herself up. I watched her for a long time. My mother and Kayla moved to a rental unit in the same county, a 2-bedroom, which I know because the foundation's local coordinator, James Ewing, checked in on the transition and gave me a quiet update. I didn't ask him to. He did it because he's thorough and he knew the history. They're managing. The word managing carries a weight it didn't used to. I am not at peace with all of it. Dr. Voss would want me to be clear about that, and she's taught me that pretending toward peace is just a slower kind of lying. I carry what I carry. The moment my mother looked at me at that door, that half second of recognition and the decision that came after, I will always carry that. But I also carry Darnell's daughter in that oak tree. I carry 200 families in transitional housing. I carry every wire transfer that used to go to people who never asked if I was sleeping, redirected now toward people who needed a floor to stand on. Some accountings take 23 years to come out right. Some cost more than money. Thomas called me 2 weeks after the transfer to tell me everything had been processed cleanly, no legal complications, no challenges filed. He said it in his usual understatement way, like he was reporting a quarterly review. Then he paused and said, "For what it's worth, Marcus, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never seen a client handle something like this with as much restraint." I told him I wasn't sure it was restraint. He said, "What was it then?" I thought about it for a minute. "Clarity," I said. "I finally knew exactly what I was looking at." He said that sounded about right. I think it does too.